I think that sales has really evolved over the years. I mean, if you look, 10, 15 years ago in senior living, what they would teach you from a sales standpoint is, hey, don't give them pricing until they're in your building. Because if you give them pricing, you're going to scare them away. You're going to see how much it costs. They're going to go running for the hills. You have to be able to prove your value to them. And you can't do that unless they're in person. They can see your building, right? Like they can see this features, benefits, and amenities. And I love that we've shifted that to be and to take on this like transparent approach where there's a lot of communities now that are posting their prices on their website and
Yeah.
just saying like, hey, if you think this is a fit, reach out. We'd love to
Yeah.
talk to you. Whereas before it was like, let's see if we can get them in the door. And then let's give them as little information as possible until we tell them all the reasons why our community is amazing. And then we'll hit them with the price.
Yeah.
And now I think we've really taken on this mindset in this approach, that we have to be able to build this trusting relationship. And I'm hearing more and more, I've been preaching this for years, but I'm hearing more and more people take this on is that, we don't necessarily have something any different than our competitors, right? What's going to set us apart, particularly in the sales process, is the way we approach sales. That's your differentiator.
Yeah.
Some people may have a pool, some people might not. Some people's apartments might be 100 square feet bigger. Or I just had a conversation this week with somebody and they were like, hey, our salespeople are really hung up that we have older communities. Listen, like I'm telling you, I've seen it. I've been there, done it, got a t-shirt. A lot of that doesn't matter. It's how you approach the person that really stands out.
Welcome to The Move In, a senior living marketing podcast from Unlock Health, a full-service marketing partner for the aging services industry. Join us for candid conversations exploring the latest marketing strategies with the senior living community leaders and innovative solution partners who are moving our industry forward. Together, we'll build a community to build better communities. What if the question you're most afraid to ask is the exact question your prospects need you to ask? Hello, I'm Larry Williams, and welcome to The Move In Senior Living Marketing, powered by Unlock Health. The truth is, the questions we avoid are often the ones that uncover what matters the most. In senior living, families aren't simply making a purchase decision, they're navigating one of the most emotional transitions of their lives. And when our focus shifts from making the sale to serving the person in front of us, the difficult conversation becomes opportunities to build trust, provide clarity, and truly make a difference. That's exactly why I'm excited to kick off our new Empathy, Curiosity, and Value series with one of the industry's leading sales educators, Reed Davis, the Chief Learning Officer at the One-on-One Sales Academy. In this conversation, Reed shares why today's most effective sales professionals aren't defined by the perfect pitch. They're defined by their ability to ask meaningful questions, listen with empathy, and have the courage to lean into conversations that others avoid. Together, we explore why the best salespeople ask the questions that others are afraid to ask, how replacing ego with empathy transformed the sales conversation, and how to prepare your mindset before every prospect interaction so you can better serve families, not just sell them. If you're looking to build deeper trust, become a better communicator, and create more meaningful relationships with prospects and their families, this episode's for you. All right, so let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Reed Davis. We are on The Move In Senior Living Marketing. I always say I have a friend with me, which is always true. This space is incredible. I love the friendships that we get to develop within the senior living community. But I will say this: like when you get to chat with someone for the first 52 minutes about a variety of topics before we hit record, that's when you know it's a friend. So I want to welcome to the show Reed Davis. Reed has probably my favorite title, Chief Learning Officer with the One-on-One Sales Academy. So, Reed, before we go any further, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. I appreciate it, and I echo that sentiment. It's always when I record my podcast too. It's always like I got to schedule 30 minutes beforehand because we're just going to start chatting. I'm like, maybe we should just do like a podcast that doesn't have anything to do with business, and it's just like friends having a conversation.
I love that idea. Or just schedule a podcast, but not actually hit record. And
Yeah.
then be like, okay, next time we actually need to record something that's of substance. But even in that conversation, I think we can take some of this to this chat because we spoke about sports. And I mean, you're a sales coach, and I want to get into this later, but I love to hear the impact that sports in coaching your kids in a variety of sports have influenced how you approach business today. But man, speaking about the conference struggles, we spoke about just coaching kids and just overall life. It's always good catching up. And but the reason I wanted to bring Reed on today, we just wrapped up our Trust is the Currency series, and I've enjoyed breaking this podcast into different series formats. And the next phase of this podcast is going into the empathy, curiosity, and value series, and really focusing on the sales side of things. And I feel like sales continues to really change and evolve. And I don't see sales being able to go forward until that trust is developed. And we can't really get that trust until we have the empathy and understand like what's needed throughout that process. And just because of that, I wanted Reed to kick us off in this series. So again, thanks for joining us today, and excited about the topic we're going to really dive into. But before we go any further, I want you to talk about the Sales Summit. That's going to take place in September. Was it mid-September, I believe?
Yeah, September 14th, 15th, and 16th in
Awesome.
St. Louis.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Tell us a little bit more about that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, one of the things that we continue to see is that kind of across the landscape of conferences, um, we don't see much sales. There's some sales tracks here and there, and I think some conferences are maybe kind of making a real effort to add back in more sales. But at the end of the day, what drives our business is occupancy and revenue. And so we set out to kind of create a conference, so to speak, where that's all we focus on. So for 2 days, we bring in sales professionals, both from inside the industry and from outside the industry. And we really focus on building some of those like essential sales skills that you were just talking about, right? Like, how do we use empathy appropriately? How do we listen empathetically? How do we build trust? Because I think one of the things that's cool is that, 10, 15 years ago, when David Smith was, or even maybe before that, when he was rolling out prospect centered selling, it was this like radical idea that you had to build trust, and that the sale was this highly emotional process. It wasn't like a typical sale. And I think the cool thing now is that there's a lot more reception to that, right? Like, I think a lot more people recognize that this is a completely different sale, that you do have to sell with emotion, that building trust is incredibly important. So we're not necessarily fighting the uphill battle that maybe David did 20, 25 years ago with, getting people to realize that. I think what the uphill battle now is really being able to give salespeople those resources and those opportunities to learn. And so that's why we created the Sales Summit. It's kind of like the anti-conference. I even hesitate calling it like a conference because it's not like it's not your typical conference where you have 5 or 6 sessions that you have to choose between at the same time. We have everybody in the same room hearing the same message. And so while we're focusing on sales skills, we're also focusing on how do we become a better leader? What are some of those key KPIs that we should really be measuring? And with the access to technology these days and the access to data, and to be able to really kind of like extrapolate some of that information out of our CRMs or out of our software systems, what can we learn from that? And what can we learn from the technology? So it's not like we're anti-AI. In fact, one of our keynotes is based off of, what did we learn from 10,000 not mystery shots, but like 10,000 role plays with an AI role play agent.
Oh,
So
that's going to be awesome.
yeah, we're embracing like all of that kind of technology, while at the same time, it's just focused on how do we help more older adults find the right community. Hopefully it's our place, right? But if it's not, how do we help them kind of through that journey?
Yeah, and I think that's where sales have changed so much. You and I have been in sales many, many years. And I got the gray hair to show it right now. And just seeing where it's evolved from when I came into sales, it was, hey, you're actually introducing the product, you're trying to take them along on this journey. And just through strong marketing strategies, now it's changed a lot. Where a lot of times people are they're going on this journey and figuring out who to narrow the funnel down to, and then the right salesperson can take them and really guide them along the way. And so I think that's a key part of this is just understanding the new layout. And you spoke about AI. We can leverage AI, we can leverage technology to do the heavy lifting so we can show up as our best self and really showcase, a different value. And going back to what you said, like hopefully it's your community. But I think that's where strength really lies in sales these days, is really just giving direction, regardless if it's you or someone else. You and I speak about like the power of abundance. If like there's not, don't have that scarcity attitude, really have that abundant, mindset, which is like, hey, look, there are so many people out there that need to hear about our community. Let's just help them, and good things are going to go from that point. So just make sure that we don't address it as a sales concept, but look, we're going to take them along this journey and help them. And however that's meant to be, it's going to end up positive for all parties.
Well, and it's interesting that you talk about that because I think that sales has really evolved over the years. I mean, if you look, 10, 15 years ago in senior living, what they would teach you from a sales standpoint is, hey, don't give them pricing until they're in your building. Because if you give them pricing, you're going to scare them away. You're going to see how much it costs. They're going to go running for the hills. You have to be able to prove your value, to them. And you can't do that unless they're in person. They can see your building, right? Like they can see this features, benefits, and amenities. And I love that we've shifted that to be and to take on this like transparent approach where there's a lot of communities now that are posting their prices on their website and
Yeah.
just saying like, hey, if you think this is a fit, reach out. We'd love to
Yeah.
talk to you. Whereas before it was like, let's see if we can get them in the door. And then let's give them as little information as possible until we tell them all the reasons why our community is amazing. And then we'll hit them with the price.
Yeah.
And now I think we've really taken on this mindset and this approach, that we have to be able to build this trusting relationship. And I'm hearing more and more, I've been preaching this for years, but I'm hearing more and more people take this on, is that, we don't necessarily have something any different than our competitors, right? What's going to set us apart, particularly in the sales process, is the way we approach sales. That's your differentiator.
Yeah.
Some people may have a pool, some people might not. Some people's apartments might be 100 square feet bigger. Or I just had a conversation this week with somebody, and they were like, "Hey, our salespeople are really hung up that we have older communities." Listen, like I'm telling you, I've seen it. I've been there, done it, got a T-shirt. A lot of that doesn't matter. It's how you approach the person that really stands out.
Yeah. How do you develop that trust? And trust is only accomplished on that person to person level, right? It's really that human component. Like you said, there's so many communities that really the amenities are very similar. It's just
Yeah.
really how do you make someone feel like they're going to be taken care of, and like who's going to really take ownership of that journey for them. And I think that's key. The best way I like to think about sales is not you're not trying to talk anybody into anything. It's more about exploring the fit that exists. And so like just see if you can help them explore that fit and see if it's a good fit for your organization. If not, that's okay. Like regardless, be that Sherpa. And I think this is a good place to talk about the subject you and I are going to go down, just because when I reached out to you and I mentioned like, hey, you're the one I want to kick this series off with, but I want you to tell me what you're passionate about, and I want to hear more about that front, right? And I'm taking your words right here. You mentioned that to channel your inner hero instead of letting your ego control when it comes to asking better questions during the sales process and not being afraid to ask uncomfortable questions. And I love this because ultimately, like, I think that salespeople are afraid to ask tough questions because they're afraid of the response. And it's
Yeah.
easier to keep someone connected by not addressing the tough questions. So, when you say that, looking to help groups channel their inner hero instead of your ego, what does that look like in a sales conversation?
I think it really kind of comes back to like one kind of understanding like who's your hero, right? And why. And so a lot of times at sales trainings, I'll tell people, I'm like, hey, listen, I'm not trying to get weird here, right? Or like this be this like Zen kind of moment, but like close your eyes, right? And just think about who your hero is. And then think about why. And time after time again, when I'm like, all right, everybody kind of like open your eyes, come back. Like if anybody wants to share, and their hero all shares similar traits, right? It's perseverance. It's somebody that never gave up. It's somebody that overcame the odds. It's somebody that treated people with, kindness and empathy, and that they genuinely cared about other people. Those are kind of the traits that really exemplify what somebody's hero is. And sometimes it's, a real life person, sometimes it's a fiction person. I kind of have two heroes. Like I have my grandfather, it's kind of my real life kind of inspiration hero. Ted Lasso is kind of like my fictional hero, and they share a lot of the same qualities. And the other side of that too is one of my salespeople one time, she had a bunch of pictures of her grandfather kind of on this like on a pin board. And I said, tell me a little bit about your grandpa. Like, why do you have all these pictures? And she said, I call this my why board. And I said, I dug into that a little bit more. I was like, tell me, like, what does that mean? And she's like, when I do this because I had such a great relationship with him, right? Like, I don't do this to get rich. I don't do this to make money. So when, I've been told no 3 or 4 times in a day, and I know I need to make that extra phone call, and I just am not motivated, or maybe I'm not just in the headspace to do it. I look at that and I kind of channel my inner grandfather and be like, what would he have done? Right.
That's
Like,
awesome. I love
and I
that.
thought that was really cool. It actually it inspired me. I have a picture of my grandfather and I that sits right here in my office that I kind of look at and go, okay, like, what would he tell me in this moment? Or what would he say to me? And so when we think about kind of channeling your inner hero, that's what I'm talking about, right? Like it's not giving up. It's digging in further. It's wanting to know more instead of like your hero tells you, well, listen, the reason that person is ghosting you is because your building is older and your apartments are smaller and you think your pricing is a little bit too much, right? Those are the stories that like we start to control ourselves, and your ego has like a really great place, right? Your ego is there to kind of protect you.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the devil and the angel on your shoulder, right? Your ego is like, hey, don't make that phone call, because if you get told no one more time today, that might just be
Yeah.
the straw that breaks the camel back. Whereas like your hero is sitting there going, no, hey, make the phone call. The reason they're not calling you back is because they're scared of the next step, or they're
Yeah.
scared of something, right? Like your hero is the one that's kind of motivating you to ask that tough question or to make that phone call, even though you're like, God, is it me? And
Yeah.
because most of the time it's not, right? But that's what we tell
We feel
ourselves.
that way. Yeah. How am I
Yeah,
gonna mess this up?
I did
Like,
a
if
bad
I say the
job.
wrong thing, I could wreck this, or I can, like, you start getting into your head.
I will tell you about the worst tour I ever thought I did. I'm 20 some odd years old, right? I'm filling up a brand new assisted living that we just opened. It was like way at that time, it was on the outskirts of Omaha. It was in a really kind of low traffic area, beautiful community. And I do this tour for this daughter, and the daughter doesn't say 2 words during the tour. I mean, she literally, I think she said, uh-huh, and yeah, the entire tour. And I thought, right, this is where your ego comes in. You know what I did? I thought the tour went so poorly that I didn't even follow up with her. I closed the lead. I thought,
Really? Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah. I thought, man, she and I did not connect. I
Yeah.
must have done just a terrible job. She, started making up all these stories in my head, closed the lead. 10 days later, she calls me and she's like, "Hey, Reed, this is, Michelle or whatever." And I'm like, "Oh." And she goes,
Are
"I
you were you like, "Are
really."
you still mad, Michelle?"
I remember, I mean, I can remember like just vividly
Yeah.
sitting there. I think I almost in like silence because I didn't know what to say. Right. And I was like, "Yeah, how can I help you today?" And she was like, "Well, I really enjoyed the tour." And I was like, "Oh, that's news, to me." Obviously, I didn't say that's what I'm thinking in my head. And she goes,
Sure.
"I'd love to know what the next steps are for being able to move my mom in." And had her, within 2 weeks, mom moved in. Mom was a completely different person than her daughter. Mom, I mean, she was absolutely hysterical. If we went back to that building, I could show you the apartment her mom lived in and the apartment that she took. But I was shocked, right? But it's like now, all these years and all this experience later, what I'm realizing is that was my ego telling me, like, "Hey, you had done a really poor job. She wouldn't even talk to you." But if I really truly went back and looked at it, she was probably unbelievably nervous. She's
Mhm.
having to move her mom. She moved her mom from 7 hours away. So she lived on the most western part of Nebraska, which is about 7 hours from here. So she's having to deal with moving her mom out of the house that she lived in literally her entire childhood. I mean, her mom, and I think had lived in the house 50 years or something like that. She'd lost her husband in that house. She was having to deal with moving her mom in. Her mom was starting to have some memory problems, wasn't
Mhm.
quite the person that she used to be, right? So she's dealing with all of these things. And if I would have known what I know now, I probably would have asked about that, right? That's channeling your inner hero,
Sure.
asking about some of those things, asking about the objections, maybe even saying, "Hey, you didn't really have a whole lot to say during the tour. I'm curious, like, clearly you're processing things. Like, what are you thinking?" Well,
Yeah.
25-year-old Reed didn't ask that because I would have been worried that she was thinking, "I hate this place. It's too expensive. There's no way my mom would fit in." Whereas now I realize she had a lot of things going on
Yeah.
and is
And the
processing.
emotional side of this, and so she has her own, mind games that's taking place.
Yeah.
And then I think about you mentioning on the hero side, when I think about the hero, it's being courageous and honest. And I think that's the hard part with sales is just being courageous to ask those questions and not to get to that next phase of the sell, but to really understand what's needed.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes, and I wish I remembered where I heard it or where I saw it, but the quote is, "Your comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there."
I
And
love that.
and it probably stems from, if anybody's ever watched like Simon Sinek's, um, I think it's a TED talk or
Mhm.
talk about the why, right?
Start with why.
Yeah, start with why. And so, yeah, I often think about that quote and thinking, the reason we don't ask those tough questions or the reasons we don't kind of go out on that limb is probably one, it makes us uncomfortable, right? And we don't want to offend somebody. But I think that if you've done a good job building trust, I think it allows you to be able to ask some of those tougher questions. But it's a really difficult thing. It's actually, speaking of the sales summit, it's one of the topics at the sales summit. is we're having Tammy Calais come in, and she's going to talk about like how how do we have those tough conversations? How do we set ourselves up to be able to have them? How do we kind of set the precedence for having some of those conversations, and then having that like inner, I don't know if it's strength, confidence, whatever it is, to be able to ask those and not be afraid of the consequence.
Yeah, and not afraid it might lead to no, right? And I think
Yeah.
sometimes we're afraid to ask those questions because it might shut down the sale. But when it comes down to it, I think sales is at its best when your true intention is to serve. Always check your intention at the door. If it's to serve, if it's to help, that's going to come through. And you can base all questions off of that. If your intention is to sell, then that's going to come across as well. And you might be hesitant to ask those questions because it might not lead to that sell. So I think a lot of times just reframing this is really my intent is to help. And that's why I want to ask these tough questions.
Yeah, I think that David Smith said to me one time, he said, I really feel like your intention drives your behavior. And so oftentimes, when we get tied to the outcome, like if all we're worried about is all the pressure that we've gotten because we have three more, leases to get by the end of the month, or we're worried that I'm going to get written up or be put on a performance plan or whatever it is, then that's what's going to drive your sales behavior. And that's how you're going to perform, right? But if your intention is to truly help and guide, then that's going to drive your behavior. If your intention is to be curious, to find out as much information about that, it's about pulling information out rather than putting information in. When you try to put information in, oftentimes it causes somebody to resist.
Right.
But when you're curious and you're asking those questions and you're trying to find out the information, I think it really shows that, hey, this person isn't a typical salesperson. A typical salesperson would just talk about their product and what they can do for that person. I think somebody that really truly cares about the person on the other side is going to ask them those questions.
Yeah.
What does this look like for you? Why are you feeling that way? How are you feeling? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. I think those are huge questions. Yeah. I think I mentioned to you before we hit record, which is one of my favorite questions is one that Nick Jasmine told me that you told him. This is a full circle moment, right? Which is, how are you doing with all of this? And ultimately, it's not a sales driven question. It's a how are you doing? Like, how can I kind of be in this moment to help you? Like, what's going on? And because of the emotions and there's a lot of complexities to all of this. And it's not just about the move, it's about the emotional steps, it's about letting go. There's so much to this. Going back to, I think you said her name was Michelle, the person you thought that she
Yeah.
was not interested. Like, she had so much on her mind. And I think that's such an important step is just to get on their level. And there's nothing wrong with taking those steps.
Well, so it's interesting. I'll tell you another story here in a second, but I want to preface it with, when we think about like what drives the sales process, there's a study done by Promatura, and what they found was that they surveyed people about why did you choose the community you chose? Like what was it that drove that decision? And the number one thing was emotion. The number two thing was personal specificity. So they felt like the sales process was really tailored towards what they wanted. And number three was the amount of trust that they felt with the salesperson, with the community, and then came the amenities, the features, the benefits, the selling style, the follow up, and all of that kind of stuff. And I wanted to kind of that I told you that story about Michelle because it was funny because later in my career, probably about 10, 15 years later, I was having a conversation with a daughter and she was in Texas. Her dad was in Omaha. It was another new property that I was helping now as a sales leader, I was helping my team fill. I think I was in charge of like following up with a place for mom leads or something like that. And I was having this conversation with his daughter, and she was real, like, just really short with me, and just wasn't friendly. And she was speaking a few more words than Michelle did, but she not much, right? And she wasn't very friendly. And I simply said, you know what? This must be really difficult for you. Your dad's here in Omaha, you're in Texas. I can't imagine how difficult that must be. And you would have thought that she said, hang on, Reed, let me put my sister on the phone. Because the person that came out with that statement or question or whatever that was a completely different person. And she
Oh,
said, you know what? She said, thank you for acknowledging that. She said, if I'm just being honest with you, she said, my dad and I have never had a very good relationship. And she said, he drove everybody away in his life. And I'm the only one that's willing to even help him a little bit. And being in Texas, I've had to take so much time off of work to have to deal with his health stuff that it's really affecting me personally. I'm worried about losing my job, and I'm just not sure. I don't know if I can make another trip up to Omaha. And you know what? Turns out her dad wasn't appropriate for assisted living. He was in a skilled nursing facility. He didn't qualify for assisted living in the state of Nebraska. I got her some resources to be able to help, kind of negotiate that journey from where she was at, some people locally that could help her. And he didn't move in, right? And she probably never talked to another person that she would have ever referred to our community because she was in Texas. She was kind of estranged from her dad. But the way that simple little statement flipped that conversation was so eye-opening to me that it was like a completely different person having a conversation with a completely different person after
yeah,
that.
I love that story, and when I think about that phrase "win or learn," right? And
Yeah.
so you not everything is going to create that win. I mean, it's sometimes you walk away with learning moments. But I think the cool thing with sales is that we get to help people, even if they don't use our services. I think that's a really, really great way just to live life.
Yeah.
Since you're throwing out some quotes, I'm going to throw one of my favorite quotes out, which is the best pillow is a clear conscience. And so if you can just help and guide, man, life's good. That karma is going to work its way back to you somehow, some way. Just go out and help others. James Lee talked about the hero's journey when it comes to senior living, specifically memory care. And you talked
Yeah.
about the family being the hero in the journey. It's not the resident, it's the family who is there with them, who's taking time away from work, who's trying to juggle kids' activities and being a resource for their parents. And I think this is stuff that we need to think about. And we need to make sure as salespeople, we need to show up our best self and interested in hearing the details and asking the tough questions, because those tough questions is where you're going to understand how you can best support them in this next phase. And just real quick, I know time goes by way too fast with you, Reed. I wish I had another 30 minutes. But what's one uncomfortable question that senior living salespeople tend to like shy away from asking?
The one that I ask the most, and I still occasionally get to do tours, which is super cool for me because for a couple of reasons, right? One, it's not what I get to do every day. I'm sitting here in my home office. I don't have a lot of seniors walking through my front door asking a tour of my house to try to move in. Although my father-in-law did live with us for about 4 months, which was fun. But
Did you sell them
I
on moving into it with you?
we tried. We loved having him here.
Yeah.
Like story
I didn't
time.
know
I
if
mean,
that was your sales moment.
no, like I'm naturally a curious person. So we would ask him all these great questions, that you've always wanted to ask your dad, right? But you never have. And so it allowed us some time to be able to do that. But I'll tell you this, and this is my favorite question to ask. And I think part of the reason why it's so easy for me to ask now is because when I'm doing a tour, I'm not tied to the outcome. I mean, obviously, like I'm there as a support person to the salesperson. And So I have a little bit more like, I think, freedom to ask some of these questions. I don't even want to say freedom. Like, I'd probably say like lack of consequences if I ask this question, right? I'm not getting a bonus if this person moves in or not. Obviously, I want them to. But my favorite question to ask is like, what are you most afraid of
Mm,
about this? Or what worries you the most?
I love that.
And I think a lot of salespeople don't ask that because they're scared of the answer, right? The thing I'm most scared of is moving in here, or
Yeah.
they're scared of, or that they're going to get an answer that they're not going to know how to respond to.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that if you don't know how to respond, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
You can just respond with, I thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure that wasn't easy.
Yeah. And I
Or reinforcing that, like, hey, that
it's
is, I can understand that's got to be a huge fear.
you and I agree on how valuable empathy is in this process. And like you have to have an empathetic heart and mind to ask that question and make
Yeah,
sure you receive it. The other thing I would say is make sure that it's not sell, sell, sell. What are you afraid of? Because then I don't think that groups will be willing to really pass that fear along. But
right.
if you actually emotionally engage and really connect with them, then you can get them to open up and really answer that question in the most authentic way.
Well, and exactly to what you just said, is that not only, does it take that prior to that question, you can't just be hitting them over the head with sales, but it can't be your response to it is how to fix it by moving into your community
That's a
either.
great
You
response.
know, I would continue to dig into that. And you can say, tell me more.
Yeah.
Or why is that, right?
Yeah.
Like some of those simple, like 3-word responses that can just draw out even more information, because the more you know, right, the more you're going to be able to help that person or to be able to ask them the right questions. But the problem is that, the old adage, what was it? Value match sales, I think, used to say like, find out the objection and then overcome it. My biggest problem that I see now is that we don't even find out the objection.
Mm.
We don't even
Yeah.
ask about it. And by asking somebody, what are you most afraid of or what worries you the most? That's asking them for their objections and probably
Yeah.
actually asking them for a lot more of their real object, right? A surface level objection might be, I'm worried I can't afford it. And if you ask my grandfather, if he could afford it, he would tell you probably not. And that was a complete bull-faced lie. He could afford just about anything he wanted. And so, it's a way of really drawing out like, what are those emotional barriers that I'm dealing with that I need to be able to get over before I can move in? And guess what? As a salesperson, you're not going to be able to pick them up and throw them over that barrier. You're going to have to be able to, you got to find out how to motivate them and ask them the right questions so that they can work their way through that process.
Yeah. I love that. My last question is we spoke about really emotionally connecting with prospects and their families. How can salespeople prep their mindset to make sure they show up with this type of empathy and value driven language and value driven questions before they go on that tour?
I think the biggest thing is for me is we don't take enough time to plan what we're going to ask or what we're going to say, right? We all have this like, we have a set tour path that we're going to take these people on, and we're going to show them how awesome our community is. And we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. We're going to take them on the same path that we always take them on. But I think if we spent more time planning and asking ourselves some of those questions in the beginning, like what are they really afraid of? What is their biggest objection? Why are they even considering moving here? What are they having to give up to be able to move here? I think if we sit down, and you don't have to do it with a team, you can just do it by yourself and find out some of those questions. I think that'll help kind of drive what your intention is, right? Because your intention there with asking yourself those questions about your prospect is really understanding who that person is, what their fears are, what their objections are, what are they emotionally prepared or not prepared to deal with in the sales process. Whereas the other way about planning out our tour route and making sure that it's clean and picked up and that we know this person likes cards, so we're going to make sure there's a card game going on, at that time that they're here for a tour. That's focused on your product, right? It's
Yeah.
not focused on your prospect whatsoever. And so if you could just focus on your prospect and really focus on like uncovering why, who are they and why are they really here and what's
Yeah.
holding them back?
I think that's great advice. I love the focus on them, not your services. And I think you
Right.
can't go wrong. And I don't care if you're selling senior living. I don't care if you're selling cars. I don't care if you're selling shoes. Like, I think that's good advice. And we ultimately, there's enough uh, technical applications that will help us through a journey. People want to connect with someone they can trust and confide in and who's going to help us ultimately. And if we can show up our best selves and be empathetic through that process, everybody wins.
Listen, like people buy you, right? They don't necessarily buy the product. They buy you as a person. I think that's one thing that makes senior living so unique is that we don't have necessarily a tangible product to be able to sell them. They can't really take it on a test drive. I mean, yes, they can come in and stay for a few days, right? But like you don't get the true
Yeah,
value, the true feeling when you do that. We are selling on such an emotional level because not only are they making a huge purchase and it's potentially probably their last big purchase, right? Like they're
yeah,
probably not going to buy another house or not going to make another huge purchase. It makes it really final, but they're having, we don't even focus on what they're having to buy, focus on what they're having to give up, right?
yeah,
A home they've lived in, that they've raised their family in. Maybe the fact that they've never lived in congregate living. A lot of them haven't lived in a dorm or
sure. This is
apartment.
all new.
It's all new. Yeah,
Yeah,
like you mean telling me I'm gonna have to go eat with 150 other people? Like
yeah,
I only ever have done that in a restaurant. Now I'm gonna have to eat
yeah,
every meal like that. There's a lot of things that go into it that are really, really scary. Am I gonna fit in? Will
yeah,
people like me? I switched high schools in the middle of high school. That was really scary. And I think about that, or when I moved into the dorms in college, who's going to be my roommate? Like,
yeah.
what are we going to do? And those things, and those are the things that our seniors are having to face moving into a senior living community. It doesn't matter how big and beautiful it is; those are really
And that's
scary
just the
things.
move there, much less
Yeah,
the move away from everything they know and everything they're
yeah,
comfortable with. There's so much here. And I agree with you. It's just really prepping your mindset to make sure you understand those hurdles and what's going on, inside, the minds of families as well as future residents. This is
yeah,
great stuff, Reed. I really appreciate this.
absolutely.
Well, man, hey, we are going to make sure we post notes about the summit in the
Yeah.
show notes. Hey, where can people find you if they want to hear more about what you're doing at the One-on-One Sales Academy? Of course, the summit. Give the website there. Just give us where people can connect with you.
Yeah. So, obviously LinkedIn, you can connect with me on there. We might have the easiest website to remember. It's just oneonone.com. You can get more information about the Sales Academy there. There's a big button up top that you can learn more about the Sales Summit. We're just getting ready to post our first round of the agenda with the speakers that we have confirmed so far. So you can find us there, or I mean, you could reach out to me through LinkedIn. My email is read@oneonone.com. Again, one of the easiest
That's
emails in senior living. So, connect with me in any of those places. Whether you're curious about the academy, you're curious about sales, anything, I'd love to be able to connect with you. This industry is all about relationships, and having been around it for, this is, I think, my 23rd or 24th year, I've been able to make some wonderful connections through that. So we're getting ready. Our podcast is getting ready to actually be made public. You'll be able to find it. The It's About Time podcast, where we cover all things sales. So any of those avenues, I'm not hard to find. So,
Hey, and I guarantee if you speak with anyone in senior living marketing or sales, they know Reed and they can point you in the right direction. And I'll say this: Reed practices what he preaches. He connects with people, and he's never trying to sell any of his services. He provides value first. And you're one of the first people I met when I got into this community, and just want to thank you for all that you do for so many people. So,
hey,
but
you gave me a Starbucks gift card for meeting with you. I still remember that. It was an awesome conversation. We've been friends ever since.
that's
So
right.
I always
That's
look
great.
forward to it.
Awesome, man. Hey, I appreciate you, Reed, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Larry.
All right,
Appreciate it.
see ya. Sales isn't about having the perfect script or the perfect response. It's about showing up with empathy, staying curious, and having the courage to ask the questions that truly matter. The conversations that change lives rarely happen because of a great sales pitch. They happen because someone took the time to listen, understand, and genuinely care. So here are 3 notes I took during this conversation with Reed. First, ask the courageous question that uncovers a prospect's fears instead of assuming you know their objections. Second, shift your intention from making the sale to serving the person in front of you. And third, prepare for every conversation by focusing on the prospect's emotions, challenges, and goals, not just your product or presentation. If there's one message I hope you take away from this episode, it's this: the best salespeople aren't the best talkers, they're the best listeners. They earn trust before they earn the opportunity to serve. A huge thank you to Reed Davis for joining us and sharing his wisdom. And if you haven't already, be sure to connect with Reed on LinkedIn and check out the One-on-One Sales Academy and the Senior Living Sales Summit. I'll include the links in the show notes. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of the Move In Senior Living Marketing. And until next time, let's go create some meaningful connections.